Hey everyone, welcome to a crappier quality stream of the Normal America show. Now, I think there's this, unwritten rule, or maybe it's written somewhere and I've just never read it, but I can intuit by watching other people that are putting themselves out there in the public light, where they always talk about how today's show is going to be really good, or what you're about to see is really good. And you used to have people like I used to in the 90s when I watched Conan O'Brien. He would always be like, yesterday's show sucked, but today, sometimes I'll do that. But I can fully admit to you when I have a show that I'm really excited about and I'm prepared for. And then shows like tonight when I normally don't stream, but I found myself with some free time with nothing else to do and said I'll stream. Now, sometimes these shows end up being the best, but I will admit, quality-wise, because I'm not at my home office, the image and sound quality might not be up to par. And when you have this fantastic nasally baritone like myself, that could be, and it is a fair criticism of mine, by the way, if you're one of the haters that watch me to just hate me, that I do get like really loud and high pitched and whiny. It's just who I naturally am. I suppose if I talked like this more often while I was doing debates, what I need to do is get chiseled and start talking like this, and then maybe I'll have more people that will listen to my show. Perhaps that's the problem that's going on. I don't know. But am I going to get the Trump sneakers? No, I'm holding out for the Trump Crocs. Who the hell needs sneakers? Dress shoes or Crocs for me. It's the only way to go. Believe it or not, I actually was just talking to my wife. We're going to a Pittsburgh Penguin game Tuesday. And I think I'm going to purchase a new pair of sneakers before we go. They will not be Trump sneakers. I assure you. And not like we can talk about that for a second if you want. Like, here's the thing. Yeah, I know, the lisp that comes through. By the way, I've heard other people that I know don't have a lisp, when they do spaces, have a lisp. I think it's something to do with, like, iPhones. And, like, perhaps whatever technology it's using. I don't know. But, yeah, I sound terrible when I'm doing a space on my... Aftershock has talked to me on the phone, using this exact phone that I have now. I've literally had phone calls with him. I don't have a lisp when I'm talking to him through this phone on a phone call, or anyone else. It's only through, like, spaces. If I record a YouTube video on my phone, I don't have a lisp. But for some reason on the space, I don't know what it's doing. So yeah, at least. But the Trump selling the shoes thing. Look, Trump's a gimmicky guy. First off, I don't think the shoes look all that bad. But I'm not that type of guy that, like, buys that stuff anyways. He had the NFTs and all this. It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's cheesy. It is. But I mean, I'm going to cut the guy a little slack on a day where he was just ordered by a kangaroo court to pay $500 million. So if he wants to sell some shoes for a couple grand, have at her, dude. I don't give a shit. Not my forte, not what I'm into. But there's so many things to complain about in the world today. And even if I just limit it to Trump stuff that annoys me, him selling shoes is far down the list. Whatever. Ain't forcing you to buy them. You don't want to buy them, don't. And, there's a market. There's a market for people that look at, like, either they like Trump like the character. And, thanks, Gloob. Appreciate it. Got myself a Pepsi Zero Sugar Cherry. Need a little caffeine for this evening. So yeah, I thought I'd do this impromptu show. Now, here's one problem. When I'm not at my home office and I'm here using my laptop is very finicky. So it's liable to just overheat and crash in the middle of the stream. If so, I'll try to start back up. Unless it does it twice in a row, and then I'll be done. And it's more likely to do that if I'm playing videos and then commenting on them. So I probably won't be playing videos. I think that... I don't know why. I'm partly bipolar, I think, is part of it. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm just normal. How the hell do you know what normal is, I guess? Especially in today's world. But sometimes I'm really excited to stream and research political stuff. And other times not so much. I don't know why. I've been very excited this week. I don't know. And people would say, but wouldn't it be the opposite? Trump just got this bad charge and... the confidential human source was arrested. I don't know. I'm energized. I feel great. You already see my goal up top, buying a computer for streaming, which I need to change that goal. If that goal was to pay for the computer that I purchased out of my own funds, that Aftershock helped me build, So that was just a recoup for that computer. My wife would absolutely throttle me if I bought a new computer in the next 3 years. Unless one blows up and we don't have a choice. Or my channel grows to the point where I'm making big bucks. But I'm not going to impose that on people. If you want to send me money for my content, thank you so much. I'll take it. But not at this point, I'm not going to buy a new computer. The other thing is, it's almost not worth it because I don't know if you've noticed, I'm doing less and less streaming when I'm not at my home office. And that's because I stream at places when I'm off the clock and I'm on the road for my work. But it's becoming more and more difficult because of the types of things my work's having me do. So it would not be fair to people, even if someone gifted me a laptop, a badass laptop, and was like, here you go, man, use this for your mobile streaming. I'd feel terrible because I might only stream 2 or 3 times a month on it. And I feel like that would be a waste. So, no, I'm probably not going to ask for that. So, but I appreciate it. 75. Well, here's the problem. The bong in stuff. Here's the problem, which I didn't realize when I put that goal up. That goal, I already had 2,000 subs. Or something like that. Over 2,000 subs when I set that goal. So it wasn't that I was trying to get 3,000 subs. It was I was trying to get 1,000 subs. And my computer, I think, the cost, I don't know. With the computer and the stuff that I bought with it, because I ended up buying like a VPN subscription, some editing software, and then some extraneous stuff like monitors, stuff like that. I think the computer ended up running me around $1,500. So between that and then the extra stuff I bought, I think I was thinking of a goal of roughly 2,000 to raise for that. And a couple things that I wanted to buy, like Aftershock told me I should have 2 or 3 monitors. I only have 1 monitor, so I was going to buy some more monitors, which I never got around to. But yeah, I feel energized, pumped, smacking some lefties around. It's not just lefties, by the way. One of the things that got me pumped was, first off, and I'm so bad for this, someone on Twitter sent me a link to Matt Taibbi YouTube channel. And it's called Racket. It's his YouTube channel. And I think it's him and Michael Schellenberger. Now, I knew they had a Substack. And they were working together on the Twitter files and other things. So I was watching some videos on Taibbi's show. And, for me, my first foray into politics was really in debate when I started debating in college in like 2003. So that was my first foray into politics. And I was not a George Bush fan. I was probably I don't want to upset my libertarian friends like Casimir and Fabian Liberty. I considered myself a libertarian, but I probably wasn't full-on libertarian. I was just much closer to libertarian than I am now. I still consider myself a libertarian adjacent. I call myself a populist. That's what I am first and foremost. But I consider myself a libertarian adjacent conservative. But I'm not full-bore libertarian. And as I get older, I'm becoming still closer to libertarian than like Christian nationalist, but I'm getting more to the center of the conservative. So, I don't give a shit, Aftershock. If you're looking for someone to pronounce names right, hit the brick. No, I'm bad. I was pronouncing Navalny or whatever, Navalny wrong the other day. Really bad, too. Anyways, so I did did some little bit of marching against the Iraq war and protesting against it, stuff like that. But as far as really, other than for debate, and I read a lot of political material for debate, like something that's relevant now. I remember reading this book by this guy, Konstantin Menengies. Probably pronounced that wrong too. That was basically saying we needed to go to war with China, like immediately. That was one of our arguments that we made. Not that we believed it. It was just an argument for a game. So I did some reading in that level. But the first really political reading I remember, contemporary, like a book that came out. Not like Rights of Man or the Federalist Papers, but like stuff that an author of the day is writing, was Matt Taibbi's book, and I forget what it was called, about the 2008 financial crisis. You remember he was writing for Rolling Stone at the time, and he was just eviscerating these banks like Goldman Sachs, and he was going through all the details of how slimy and corrupt all this stuff was, and I was really into it. And for that reason, I used to read Rolling Stone somewhat just because of Matt Taibbi. Did I get it right? Taibbi, whatever, Matt Taibbi. So I was always a big fan, and then of course, he wasn't a Bush fan or a Trump fan, and that's fine too. There were a lot of people that I liked listening to, even if I disagreed with them politically, who weren't conservative. They weren't Trump fans. They weren't fans of my political ideology. I would put Matt in that category. I'd put people like Jimmy Dore and Aaron Mattei in that category, and Glenn Greenwald. These aren't people that agree with me on sort of domestic political issues. We have an affinity for calling out powerful people and corruption. That's what I would say is our similarities. I happen to think that's the most important thing in our political system today. Anyways, so I was excited to see some of these videos, and I watched one in particular. It was how to answer Leslie Stahl. And it's like a 50-minute video. And you remember when Donald Trump, going into the 2020 election, goes on 60 Minutes, and the host Leslie Stahl's like talking to him, and he's like, I'm paraphrasing here. I can't show you the video or my computer would crash. She basically said something like this. It's like, what do you think about Biden? And he's like, well, I wish the press would be as adversarial with Biden as you are with me. Instead, you're asking questions about ice cream. And she's like, yeah, but you love this. And he's like, yeah, I do. I do like these interviews. But, Biden, you guys are so hard on me. The Obama administration spied on me. And she's like, with all due respect, there's no proof of that. And we at 60 Minutes, we don't talk about stuff. Now, at this point, the IG report had already came out that definitively showed that Trump's team was spied on. Definitive. But Matt Taibbi breaks it down, I think, in a way very similar to I do, except he's talking about things that I've even forgotten. And a couple things I didn't even know about. And it's incredibly persuasive. But he illustrates 4 or 5 areas in which the Trump team was spied on. And it's absolutely true. The only question is, was the spying warranted? Which it wasn't. I think that question's self-evident. That's why they're pushing back so much that the spying didn't happen. Remember, this is always the tactic. That didn't happen, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. But if it did happen, it's a good thing. The border's not open, there's no crisis, you're insane. But if it is, it's a good thing. There's not inflation, you're insane, it's not. But if there is, it's a good thing. Or it's your fault. It's not happening, but it's your fault if it is. Or it's Trump's fault if it is. That's the 2 tactics that they use. They always call you crazy. And then they ignore it long enough so that it gets out of the news cycle, and then say, like when I debate Destiny and I talk about all this stuff like Russiagate, he goes, that was a long time ago, who cares? Right. Crazy conspiracy theorists when I was telling them in real time that was going on, and then when I'm proven right, they're like, well, it was forever ago, what can we do now? That's always the strategy that they use. That's sort of what we're going to talk about today, those sorts of things. So Taibbi does a great job, so I recommend going to his channel. I'll put a link to it here at the end of the show if someone reminds me. But I already have a link copied because there's something even greater. If you only watch one thing, if you only have 1 hour to watch political content right now, stop watching me right now. Yeah, someone beat me to it. Vita beat me to it. And go watch the Tucker interview with Mike Benz. We're going to go over this interview sometime later in the week when I actually get to my home office and I have like a 3-hour window to stream and I can actually play the video. And then you should check out the rest of Mike Benz's videos. He got interviewed in the Epic Times and for about 6 months ago, and I watched that. And it's absolutely mind-blowing. He lays out concisely with evidence how we went from a free internet that was sponsored, that was basically supported by our foreign intelligence, because they saw the internet being open and free as an ability to have color revolutions all around the world. And the height of it was the Arab Spring. And they understood that instead of like previous to the World Wide Web, what maybe you would have to do is send in community organizers, people that, weren't necessarily advertising themselves as U.S. State Department or U.S. intelligence, that would try to be organic leaders or, infiltrate student groups and then have them have what seemed like an organic uprising. This is what they call a color revolution. Mike Benz worked for the Trump administration, was formerly at the State Department, and now he runs a project that's called like the Free Internet Organization or something. Yeah, I mean, and so he explains that this was the goal. And so the Arab Spring was the greatest example of that, where it didn't take sending in CIA agents to all these countries, to Tunisia, Egypt. All they had to do was to sort of amplify voices and feed information to voices on the ground in these countries that then sprung up what was sort of a organic looking movement. if you turn down the right voices and amplify the right voices, basically you could facilitate revolutions in countries around the world, particularly countries that you don't like. And they love this. The intel agencies love this. Basically, up until 2014, it was all cool. But what happened was, basically they started to see in Crimea in 2014 that you had a bunch of people against the Western direction the country was going, and say, we identify more with Russia. So then the intel people started to say, well, what happens if we can't control the narrative anymore in our own countries? And he goes to great lengths to explain how traditionally the intel agencies have always had their sort of ins to the way information was disclosed in the Western world, particularly the United States, the UK, and other places, because they have these relationships with journalists. And so basically, you give a little to us, we'll give a little to you, etc. And everybody's on board with basically the same international rule order and international foreign policy. But what happens if the New York Times isn't where the information's coming from anymore? Or the Washington Post, or CNN, or Fox News? What if organic people can use their own voice that then are going in an antithetical direction to what the international rules order wants, what the people at NATO want, what the people at the EU want, what the people at the UN want, what the people in the United States State Department want? Then what happens? And so they started to see problems in 2014, and then it came to a head, and I've said this for years. What were the two seminal events to me that was the oh shit moments for what I call like the establishment? Brexit and the election of Trump. And that's exactly, I could see that. I don't have the details Mike Benz has, but I could see it, and I think most people could see it. And that was their sort of, we're losing control of the narrative moment. Whoops. Because they believed they had it wrapped up. They believed their own internal polling that said Trump only had a 5% chance to win and Brexit didn't have a chance to win. They thought that they would control the narrative enough in the same way that they had for years in these Western countries, and that would be sufficient. But it wasn't. And so what they did was they took these tools, they decided that instead of a free internet being what was best for the West and these sort of establishments within it, that they needed an internet that they could control. And that's when they started to pivot. And they used the excuse of being able to do it against foreign threats. Hence the Russia collusion stuff. And they said, oh, no, we're not doing this to censor Americans. We're doing this, we're allowed to do it. We've always been allowed to do this. And Mike Benz goes into how in 47, we basically had, agencies that were created or rules that were created with this, and these agencies that said, we basically have intelligence that has a bunch of dirty tricks to influence elections around the world. And that's a good thing because there's hostile people around the world. But we can't use it against our own people. And so they had to keep that face up, right? They had to be like, oh, yeah, this is just to use against international threats. And so Russia collusion gave them the excuse to be able to use this in a way that would target Americans and censor them. And then they used that to censor for the 2020 election. They used it to censor over COVID. And now they've completely changed to saying it's not just about stopping foreign threats. It's about stopping disinformation, malinformation to protect democracy. And he explains how they don't define democracy as me and you voting. They define democracy as, well, there's the State Department, and there's the Atlantic Council, and there's academia like Stanford, and there's corporate America. What is the consensus these groups, these institutions reach? The mainstream media. They reach a consensus. To them, that's democracy. Basically, if I could sum up what he's saying in a simple way, you think democracy is the people voting. And if you're a CEO of YouTube, you get one vote. And if you're some shithead streamer like me, you get one vote. And if you're a carpenter, you get one vote. And if you're a school teacher, you get one vote. Anybody that's a citizen gets one vote. That's democracy. The idea that everyone's voice sort of counts equally when it comes to the voting process. That's not how they're looking at it. They don't look at democracy as people having a voice. They look at democracy as institutions having a voice. So the media has a voice. And the State Department has a voice. And NATO has a voice. And the Atlantic Council has a voice. And whatever they vote on, whatever decision they come to, that's democracy. And if you disagree with that, you are a threat to democracy. And so they justify stopping censorship because they literally wrote the rules now and they changed the language in this archaic way to basically say, now we consider you sitting at home tweeting, I don't know about mail-in ballots, I think they could be corrupt. That's considered a cyber attack on our democracy. And that's how they were able to censor something like censor or demonetize or shadow ban something like 30 million social media posts going into the 2020 election. And then, of course, all of the people that were in charge of this censorship are connected. They tried to have bifurcation to say, well, it's not the government. It's just institutions that are paid by the government that were created with government technology that work in tandem with the government that use the threat of government action to then go to all these social media places and say, look, we need you to censor certain things or else you'll get the ire of the government, or not just our government, governments around the world. So, for example, at one point, European countries were passing laws that basically said any of this sort of disinformation that's on your platform, we could fine you up to $50 million per instant. Or you could take this AI technology that we've created that will help censor that stuff for you. Then you won't have to worry about it. Well, what do you think the social media companies did? Yeah, you're right, Vita. When you take this in conjunction, because Mike Benz, what he doesn't do is, at least in the speeches I've heard, he doesn't go then to like, well, what does that look like? How many votes could that change? Robert Epstein takes this information and says, I think it could have changed 16 million votes. Now, we're going to go over this video in whole, but again, I'll post it. You could look, it's an hour, and I think he's a phenomenal speaker, and the hour went very quickly for me. So it's worth checking out. The Epic Times interview, which is probably the one we'll watch. We probably won't even watch the Tucker one. It actually puts the documents up on screen as he's talking about it, which I find even more helpful. Now, of course, I've been tangentially on this. I've talked about the Twitter files. I talked about censorship. I've talked about that stuff a lot. But I clearly don't have the specific details and knowledge of history that he has with these specific incidents to be able to prove what he's saying. Like, he's showing you quotes from literally the people involved in this censorship and the things they're saying. But it's amazing how on the mark I've been if this information is true. For example, one of the things I told you was the reason that Russiagate is still so important was that's one of the, I talk about this all the time, there are these seminal moments that occur that our establishment tells you you can't question. It becomes a matter of religion for them. You absolutely can't question it. January 6th, the election security of 2020, COVID, Russiagate. You can't question it. Why? Because these incidents were instrumental in them then crafting new laws, mechanisms, tools to have more authoritarian control. And so if the underlying reason for them demanding more authoritarian control falls apart, then you'll start to question whether or not these agencies should have these tools in the first place. Here's an easy example. 9/11 gives us the Patriot Act. What if, I'm just saying hypothetically, what if we came out and smoking gun 100%, like someone in the Bush administration comes out and says, we made up the whole thing, we are in arrangements with Osama bin Laden, we use these people with patsies, blah, 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 and all of a sudden people just started admitting it left and right. That'd look really bad for the government and giving them the authority of things like the Patriot Act to be able to spy on you without a warrant, without your knowledge. Same thing here. That's why Russiagate was so important to them. Because, and Mike Benz explains this, you couldn't just say, well, we need to spy on we need to censor domestic Americans. You couldn't say that. Because there was still enough people that would say, whoa, 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 whoa. You had to say, we need to spy on Russians. We need to censor Russians. Oh, this American happens to be spreading Russian disinformation. That's why then it's, and then when you look back and you're like, they still say it. Russia helped steal the 2016 election. How? What's your proof? Well, they only give two examples of proof. One is they say that Russia hacked the DNC and Hillary's server. What's the proof? Well, the FBI said so. Well, what was their proof? Basically, the argument the FBI is making is the super sophisticated Russians that were able to hack into this stuff accidentally left their own signature. The signature they use for code names like Cozy Bear, and I forget what the other one is. So we were able to directly tell they basically left a digital signature, and we could trace it right back to Russia. And you're like, oh, you got to see the server? Nah, we didn't see the server. We just got a copy of it. Well, didn't you want to see the server? Yeah, we wanted to see the server, but the DNC wouldn't let us. Why wouldn't the DNC let you? I don't know. We didn't want to ask questions. But the DNC hired a firm called CrowdStrike. And CrowdStrike told us, trust us, it was Russia, and then copied the server and gave us, and we agreed to them. CrowdStrike also said then later that there was an attack on servers in the Ukraine that was done by Russia, which ended up Ukraine's government said, no, it wasn't done by Russia. So that was the first. The second example was Russia put all these shady ads online. And Matt Taibbi does a good job of going through this. Or maybe it was Benz that talks about this. $100,000 of ads on Pokemon Go and Facebook. Half of which were pro-democratic causes. Half of which weren't seen until after the election. $100,000. In an election where they estimate there was $1 billion of media. $100,000. That's what they're telling you. They said that was an attack on our democracy. Meanwhile, Zuckerbucks are sending millions to where our elections are put. They're literally sending. If that has the ability, think of what this never made sense to me that no one called this out other than me that I know of. If $100,000 of ads are so powerful, the implication is, I don't know how many times $100,000 worth of ads would be seen. Let's say 10 cents per view. So that would be 10 times 100,000. So 1 million views. They censored 20-something million, almost 30 million posts going into the 2020 election. Almost every single one of them pro-Trump and pro-right-wing causes. Let's say each of them would have been seen on average 10 times. Many of them many of them would have been seen many more times than that because they're from big channels. How isn't that stealing an election then? If $100,000 of ads are, what is it when the entire mainstream media, social media landscape, corporate America, academia, etc., all goes in on the same message? What is it when the intel agencies put their thumbs on the scale by doing things like leaking to the press to make Trump look bad and then denying stories like they did the Hunter Biden laptop? We're supposed to believe that's not interfering in an election. But $100,000 of ads, half of which were pro-Democrat, half of which weren't seen till after the election. Well, that's interference. That's interfering in the election. And so you got to watch this Mike Benz. I just think it's a phenomenal episode. Also, I watched the Brett Weinstein talking about migrants coming from what was the Darien Gap, which is also very interesting. If you watch that Tucker episode, it was episode 72. So anyways, the Mike Benz thing got me excited. The videos I've been watching got me excited. And so I was happy to smack people around on Twitter and other places. The gaslighting is just becoming more and more blatant. Now here's the thing, right? We live in interesting times. It's still a great time to be alive. As far as the course of human history, you may argue that in the United States we're on the downswing, which is probably true. All empires fall. But I don't know how hard we're going to fall or how fast, or I'm still going to keep fighting, regardless. But when it comes to the greater look at human history, I'm not fighting off tribes every day for my family's life, I'm not missing many meals. I have electricity. So all in all, I'm very grateful and continue to think that I'm lucky that I was born an American. I'm lucky that I was born relatively healthy. I'm lucky that I was born in a time like now. And I'm lucky that I had parents that cared. And I'm lucky I have the greatest wife and the greatest son. So I am amongst the most lucky people that have ever existed. Don't get me wrong. And history has seen things like we're seeing now. It's just, the twist on it is, it's like, let me put it this way, armor is always one step behind the weapons. Your shield is always, you get a bronze sword and then you get a bronze shield to block it. And then another weapon comes that could pierce the bronze shield, so you have to upgrade your arm. This is always the give and take. There is an offensive maneuver, and then takes time to have a defensive. The same is true of sort of propaganda and other such things. They didn't expect the internet would be as fast, particularly with the advent of social media, of people being able to pierce through the gatekeeping of sort of the foreign policy establishment to control the narrative. They didn't expect that. That's one of the things that's so frustrating about Trump in 2016. I'm shocked that he won. I'm sure they were more shocked than me. But it was a unique time to actually start to gut these institutions that put their thumb on the scale. And the fact that Trump didn't do it, and you could say, well, who could have, or it's not his fault, or it is his fault, whatever. I'm just saying he didn't do it. I think people know where my take on it is. Check out John Ward. Maybe I'll check it out. Okay, I think we're still good. Sorry, I was distracted reading the chat there. But the fact that that didn't happen, now they've put their foot on the gas even more. Oh boy. Now we got to really up the game. And that's where we're at. Mike Benz says we're basically 6 years into them realizing after the election of Trump, like, we got to do this. We can no longer allow free speech in the United States. And it's metastasizing. And the longer it goes, the harder it will be to deal with. And if we don't deal with it in 2024, it's going to be even harder to deal with it in 2028, etc. But this has happened in the past. Propaganda has been waged on domestically in countries in the past. It's just, we can see it more. And so, it does feel like we're at the ebbs and flows of history. We're at an ebb. And it's like, where will you be? It brings me to a speech. You want to listen to this speech? I'd never heard of this. Maybe some of you have. I'll probably crash my computer trying to play it, but it's only 3 minutes, so we'll give her a go. Rudyard Kipling. I'm not a big poet, so I don't know. We'll play this for you. We'll try. But I saw this today. This pumped me up. Let's hope the audio works.
If you can keep your head when all...
Help if I plug my headphones in. Now the audio probably won't work. Ugh. Ugh. Boomer stuff. Boop. Alright, there we go.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise.
That sums me up. I certainly don't talk too wise or look too good.
If you can dream, and not make dreams your master, if you can think, and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster, and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to, broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools.
Doesn't that feel like where we're at?
If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose, and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
I've never... He wrote The Jungle Book. Well, there you go. I just watched The Jungle Book with my son, the Disney one, here. It sums up so much of, I think, why I'm such a happy person. I had someone on Twitter say, you know, when I'm talking about the corruption, they're like, oh, I love watching how sad you are, how much you're going to cry here. Why? Nothing's going to happen that I don't expect. I'm already expecting the worst. I expect Trump won't win. I expect he'll probably be thrown in jail at some point. I expect the censorship will get worse. I fully expect at some point I'll lose my job for my political opinions. And yet still I'm happy. Why? Well, one, because I recognize how lucky I am and that I have an awesome family and an awesome community around me. But second, because I can sleep at night. I know I'm doing what I think is right. You know, some of the things that said that really resonated. You know, the ability to talk and walk with kings, but basically to keep your humility. That's how I've always felt. I've always felt that I feel most at home with people that didn't graduate high school that are working 9-to-5 jobs, you know, working on roofs or road work, construction, etc. Those are the people that I have an affinity for. But I could go to the halls of Congress. I could interview senators as I've done on my show, or Congress people as I've done on my show. I don't mind. That's fine too. Watching something you've worked so hard towards be broken, but still picking it up with worn out tools. That's how I feel. I feel like the people that are on my side, allegedly the Republicans, hate me. I'm working for a country that's best for all people, even the people that disagree with me, and most of the people are fighting me. Because, okay, things could always be worse. No one says we live in a perfect society, but I still love this country and will do what I can to fight for it. And I'm still incredibly lucky. And I know that. I know that I am. If you could lose, if you know to treat both victories and losses, right, with the same temperament, which is something I try to do. You don't believe me? Go back and watch me read my post in 2016 when Trump won. I wasn't rubbing salt in people's wounds that night. I wasn't. I understood there were people that were devastated, and I know what it feels like to not have your side win, particularly in politics, because my side never wins. Upton Sinclair, yeah, no, not the jungle. But that's how I feel. I think about it a lot. What will my legacy be? Well, my son, that'll be my legacy. And hopefully I raise him right. So far, so good. We'll see what kind of man he becomes. And then other than that, I have no shame. I said what I said in a time that it was unpopular to say it. I was watching a post today from some blue checkmark class Twitter person who put a clip of Bono from U2 on stage saying, say Navalny to his crowd because Putin won't say it. I said, now why doesn't Bono stand up and say, now say Gonzalo Lira? Where is their bravery? It is not brave to tout the cultural and establishment narrative over and over and over again. There are no consequences. There is no risk. It's not brave. How brave of you to have the exact same opinion as every corporatist, politician, media personality, academic. How brave of you. Wow, he did it. He stood up and said something. Great. What next? Cigarettes are bad? Wonderful. That doesn't mean what he said isn't true or based on truth, but there's no bravery to it. And when you're willing to once you're going to enter that realm, well then, will you comment on other issues of similarity? And this isn't well, if you care about cleaning up the ocean, why don't you talk about the mistreatment of the Native Americans? Two seemingly unrelated things. This is you saying that we need to punish and call out and condemn a regime in Russia that locks up political dissidents by rewarding a regime in Ukraine that locks up political dissidents. If you're going to be brave and come out and speak the truth about this sort of issue and then be silent on the exact same issue to the exact same side that you seem to be defending that would hurt the establishment narrative because you're afraid, oh, that's not popular, that won't go over well with my audience, then you're nothing. How do you look at yourself? If you're an artist and you don't want to weigh in, don't weigh in. No problem. Someone else is using my name and PFP on Twitter. Really? They saying anything good? Maybe I'll retire. Let me look it up. Post the link. Did they just create it today? Did I piss off the NAFO people? Is that what it is? Oh yeah, Bono sucks. Don't get me wrong. Bono's just the example I saw that someone was saying on Twitter. It's all of them. Just search robnoerr. Let's do it. I only see me. Nope, don't see anyone else. That's a good question. Is it pro bono if they do it? Oh, I'm blocked. That's why. That's why I couldn't see it, because I'm blocked. That's a shame. Well, they have 9 posts. Cool. Yeah, that would be why I couldn't see them, huh? Nothing political. You could report it if you want, I don't care. Not political, what, they thought I had a cool sounding name and face? Cool. Oh, if he asks someone for money, definitely block. Yeah, I'll report that. Please fill out this form. I'm going to verify my identity. Goodness gracious. Scan me? Oh my goodness. What's going on here? This is becoming a big thing. Sheesh. Alright, we're going to deal with this later. Not pissing with this now. Yeah, anyways. I don't mind if someone's just making fun of me. That's fucking fine. But if they're scamming people out of money, that's not good. No, you will not see me make public posts asking for money unless I specifically tell you. If like I would put up a GoFundMe, like my friend Let's Be Frank had a hurricane or a tornado hit his home. But you will never see me just linking my PayPal, like send me money. I link my PayPal on my channel and things like that, but I'm not going to be posting like that. Anyways, so that's to me, like when he says, are you brave enough? To me, what that poem's saying is like, you'll have the earth and you'll be a man. That is why I'm so happy. You know, I've played it on my channel before, but probably my favorite speech is this speech that's on YouTube that they've parsed together what they think Alexander the Great gave, where he's talking to his troops that are basically pissed at him because he was trying to send some of them home. And he just gives this speech. It's like a 7-minute speech where he's just like, I am the biggest badass that's ever lived. If you want to be pissed off because I've treated you so great. No, you didn't send that 100 mil to me, Levin. Sorry, you got. I'm a Nigerian prince in need of help. Maybe I am, and I just don't know it yet. I don't know. I could use some forms of help. But anyways, no, I saw that speech. I was excited today. I was energized. And that's the propaganda with this Navalny stuff it's through the roof. It's through the roof. The gaslighting and the lying, it's at the same time it's demoralizing to me to see how so many people that are opposed, not to me, but are opposed to giving the people a voice, to fighting corruption, to allowing actual people to have differing ideas and free speech. That's what I stand for. The establishment wins by censoring the truth. We win by open discussion. By people learning the truth. That's what this represents to me. And so it's demoralizing to see how many people want to disagree with me and disagree with those that are showing the propaganda, the corruption. Thank you so much, Pasty. I appreciate it. I really do. No feet pics, nope. It is demoralizing to see them deny reality. Absolute denial of reality. Just absolute. Deny any amount of equal application of standards at all. They don't even try. They just don't. It's demoralizing. Some of them may be literal bots, but those that aren't bots are NPCs, the equivalent of a bot. Truly, it's like fighting an emotionless, though they're super emotional, but it's like there's no getting to it. A robot. There's nothing you could say that will get through. They don't care. They truly feel like a different organism than you. And I don't mean I'm saying that about them. That's what they're saying about us. They're morally superior. They're better. Our words mean nothing. It's ironic because there's this big argument going on right now on X about the movie Starship Troopers because some lefties are saying, well, it's a criticism of fascism. And then right-wingers are saying, yeah, but it made fascism look cool. And the author had no idea the director had no idea what fascism really is. And actually the original book was an endorsement of sort of Earth in that book. And the director tried to invert the meaning of the book. But the left is celebrating the bugs that just want to kill humanity. That's what the left said. And I'm not here to talk about the philosophical implications of that book or anything such. But that's in effect what this battle, they don't give a shit. They're the hive mind. They say whatever they're told to say. They feel completely different to you. They are indifferent. The bugs and Starship Troopers weren't going to listen to the troops saying, hey, wait a minute, why are you doing this? What's going on? Why'd you launch an asteroid and kill 80 million people in Buenos Aires? Which is what the bugs said. Why'd you do that? Let's talk about this. Can't you see how that's the same sort of thing you would criticize us for doing? It's not going to work. It becomes frustrating. I'm not saying go to physical battle with them like the Starship Troopers. I'm just saying it's ironic at the same time that the left is pushing that on X, that you also see this massive propaganda push to once more send infinite dollars to Ukraine and Navalny and all of this stuff. So here's one of the things what is the argument with Navalny? Why is it so grotesque? And I know I talked about this the other day. What is it that we're really pissed about? Well, first, let's talk about what we don't know. We do not know what his cause of death was. We could guess, but we don't know. As far as I know, no one in the West has seen an autopsy, seen a body. I know what Russia said, but let's say for the sake of argument, and I don't even disagree with this, we just ignore what Russia's saying. Obviously, Russia has a vested stake in saying that this was a natural cause. So, could be a natural cause, but maybe not. So, we're not going to just take Russia's word for it. Now, we can ask ourselves, does it make sense? Navalny didn't seem to be rising in the polls or large protest in Russia occurring because of Navalny and blah, blah, blah recently here. So, why kill him now when it seems like Russia's doing remarkably well in the war in Ukraine? Why do it now? Seems, it always seems like our enemies, the United States enemies, are always snatching defeat from the cusp of victory, doesn't it? You remember when Assad all but won his civil war in Syria? And then allegedly he was like, you know what? Now that it's all but over, and I only have one chance to lose, and that would be the international order coming in, I'll gas my own people. That's what I'll do. Why not? I got it all wrapped up. Let's do it. Let's roll the dice and try to lose. Doesn't it seem like that stuff happens a lot? But for the sake of argument, let's say Navalny's dead, okay? We don't have yet that doesn't stop everyone who wants to decry his death of saying it was murder. Now, there's two explanations for this. One, they're full of shit. They're just assuming it's murder, but they have no proof. That's one. And they could say, well, we think that he was poisoned before by Putin. That may or may not be true. For the sake of argument, though, let's say it is true. I know Merkel said that, and that's what the West told us. I'm sorry, I don't believe them anymore on face value. I don't. Do I think Putin's the type of person that would poison? Yeah, I do. So it absolutely could have happened. But I'm sorry, I'm not just taking them at face value. But for the sake of argument, let's. And say he was poisoned previously. Doesn't mean that's why he died this time. Doesn't. So you're talking out your ass. You may be right. You absolutely may be right. But you don't know. And you're saying it's murder. And that's because of explanation number 2. Which I actually buy. I buy this explanation. Which is, well, even if they didn't physically poison him, or shoot him, or hang him, or stab him, or in any other way kill him, the fact that they unjustly locked him up for what would basically be an indeterminate amount of time predictably led to his death. Maybe he was treated not in the best manner, as far as the food he was receiving or the medical care. I'll buy that. I will. I'm not saying that's definitively what happened, but I'm saying if you're going to say he was a political dissident, a political prisoner, and was treated harshly, which predictably led to his death, so it might not have been literally, we're injecting you with poison, but we would still call that murder. I'll allow that. I'll be like, all right, I'm not going to push back on that hard. Does everyone agree? That's basically the only two explanations. Either they're full of shit because they haven't seen an autopsy or anything like that and they're just yelling murder, or what they're really saying is, well, because of the situation. And so I'll assume if it's part 1, you're a shithead and it's like, whatever, and I'll explain why in a minute. But if it's number 2, yeah, I'll go with that. I'm not going to insult you for that. I think that's a reasonable take. Even if you disagree with that take, I think that's a take that's within the realm of reason, that reasonable people could say, yeah, I would call it murder. If I get locked up tomorrow and I'm put in a shitty situation where I get 1 meal a day and my health's deteriorating and I'm in a cold cell and I'm only getting an hour a day of exercise and stuff like that, and then 5 years from now I die, I might consider that murder. I might say the government murdered me if they locked me up unjustly. I probably wouldn't say anything because I'd be dead, but you get the point. So yeah, okay. All right. But if that's murder, what do we say about the Gonzalo Lira situation? The argument seems to be Navalny's death illustrates a problem that we've thought about for a long time, which is the problem of jailing political dissidents, whether it be your political opposition, whether it be a random protester. The idea of one of the values that we supposedly embrace in the West is free and fair elections and free speech. And if governments around the world are saying, no, we're going to lock up people for the crime of politically disagreeing with us, we condemn that. And the fact that he died in prison, we could say we blame him for that death, not necessarily because he directly poisoned Navalny, or Russia directly poisoned, but because they locked up this political dissident and took his life away. And now he's dead. And so you could have been outraged immediately with the jailing of Navalny if you believe it was the jailing, which it looks like it was, the jailing of a political dissident. Now that, remember, it could be like this. You're outraged at the treatment of the 9/11 first responders. You're outraged how they were shit on and treated. And you think about that, but then as life goes on, you're not necessarily talking about it every day. But then your neighbor that's a 9/11 first responder dies of lung cancer. And now you're reminded of it again. Thank you, Granny Amos. I appreciate the sub. Thank you. And so you start talking about it. Oh, look, another one died. It was outrageous the day before. You just weren't talking about it. You're reminded of it. And I don't blame that. That's a natural human reaction, of course. Now do Gonzalo Lira. He just died like 6 weeks ago. And they have no answer. None. They have no answer. This is the sorts of answers you get. He was a fat chain smoker. Huh? He had poor health. He knew. What? So if it comes out that Navalny was smoking a pack a day in prison, are you going to be like, oh, now we don't give a shit. Never mind. He had it coming. He was a womanizer. Lira. He was a sexist. He was a sex pest. So there are people, Amnesty International declared that Navalny was a horrible right-wing nationalist that was an Islamophobe. He put videos up likening Muslims to cockroaches, talking about the need to kill them. Does that mean, oh, never mind then. Now we're not concerned. Why are you defending Gonzalo Lira? Why are you defending it? What the fuck is wrong with you? I'm not defending Gonzalo Lira the person. I know almost nothing about him. Let's say for the sake of argument, I listen to all of the negative stories about him. Let's say that I say, oh yeah, he was a sex pest, and he was a liar, and he was a propagandist, and he was a real scummy, shitty person. I'm not saying any of that. I don't know that that's true. But let's just say for the sake of argument, all of it is true. And? So? Is that why he was locked up? Was he locked up for just being a chain smoker? For being a shitty person? No! That's not why he was locked up. He was locked up for being a political dissident. That's why he was locked up. Me saying that's wrong isn't defending that character. Similarly, if they would lock up Nikki Haley right now, I don't like Nikki Haley. I've been quite clear throughout my posts and my streams, I don't like Nikki Haley. I would find that to be outrageous. And when I said, what the fuck is the Biden administration doing locking up Nikki Haley? And if they were like, it's because Haley denied Russian war crimes, I would be like, what? No, that's insane. And then what would these people say? Why are you defending Nikki Haley? You don't think Nikki Haley's a shitty person? It's irrelevant. It is absolutely irrelevant. Okay, let's go to the next argument then. Gonzalo Lira wasn't a journalist. Okay, so? So it's okay to jail political dissidents if they're not journalists? Only journalists and politicians apply? And by the way, who gets to decide what a journalist is at this point? Well, he just did a lot of shit talking on his stream. I don't see how he's a journalist. Who's a journalist then? Lesley Stahl at CNN? The New York Times? The Washington Post? Mouthpieces for our intel agencies? That's the only people that are journalists? Who are they to gatekeep that term? Now, you could say journalist in the sense of, were you a credentialed journalist? Did we go through their bullshit little hoops to call yourself a journalist? Whatever, fine. But I don't give a shit anyways. Again, for the sake of argument, I'll say, yep, he was the world's worst guy and a chain smoker and he wasn't a journalist. And? How does that change the argument at all? Then you got this. He was a spy for Russia. He was giving troop positions to Russians. So if your country gets invaded and you're got a guy who's giving troop positions to the enemy. Don't you think it'd be worth locking up? Okay, I read the indictment. Nowhere in the indictment does it talk about him giving up troop positions or being a spy for Russia. I looked into this shit when he died because there is an argument that's like, look, if your country's being attacked and you have people within your country that are literally helping the enemy, at what point do they literally become the enemy? But just talking up the enemy, no, that's political dissonance. That's no different, as far as I'm concerned, than saying, well, we should have locked up all the protesters of the Vietnam War. We were at war. And that war had to do with stopping... Yes, it was just Vietnam, but we were also in the greater context at a war, a Cold War with the Soviet Union. And Vietnam was this flashpoint. We had to win there. And so at the time, imagine Johnson locking up scores of people at Woodstock and performers. Jimi Hendrix, Creedence, they're all being locked up. And we're like, well, we're at war. And they're denying Soviet war crimes and Vietnamese war crimes. And they're this is it. This is what the indictment says Lira did. He denied Russian war crimes and he insulted Ukrainian troops. Sounds like the Vietnam protesters to me. I'm sorry, that's not justification for locking up. That's locking up a political dissident. If the charges were he was handing intelligence to Russians, now we have a different conversation. We need to see, is that true? What sort of intelligence? But that's what he was charged with. And yet, verbatim, I've had probably at this point 50, 60 people respond to me going, he gave away troop positions to Russians. Really? Show me in the indictment. Crickets. I had one person that tried to speak up and say, well, they intentionally treated him with kid gloves and didn't put that in the indictment. Wait, what? So they knew he was spying for Russia but decided not to charge him with that and instead charge him with insulting Ukrainian troops? What sense does that make? And how do you call kid gloves locking him up to the point where he dies in prison? That's a pretty insane definition of kid gloves. There you go. There you go. Respect says it. See? This is what I'm talking about. Here's the people. Ukraine imprisoning a guy justifying the Russian invasion, same as Putin imprisoning a leader of political opposition. Nuance is dead, I guess. No, the question is, so jailing political opposition. Well, then if that's all it is, we don't care if you jail political dissidents. We don't give a shit. If you jail someone just because they're talking shit on your country, no problem. It only matters if you're jailing political opposition. That's where we're at. Why? Why doesn't that matter? So, for example, the U.S. journalist that's locked up in Russia right now, if he dies tomorrow, you would say, no big deal. Who gives a shit? What if that journalist was writing stories critical of Russia? You would say, too bad. He was in the country and was talking shit on them in wartime. That's the way it goes. That's what you would say? Nuance is, you have principles. You say, we as America will condemn countries that lock up people just because they're insulting the political class. Literally, one of the charges of Lira was he insulted troops. Now, you might not like that, and I might not like that. But that doesn't mean he deserved to be imprisoned. And again, these people are giving I'm telling you right now, many of these people would have called for the jailing of Ron Paul after 9/11. Oh, he's denying Afghani war crimes. He's denying Taliban war crimes. He's spreading their talking points. Again, what this person in chat is trying to say is, well, Lira had it coming because he was spreading Putin's talking points. And then he'll probably say, and Rob, you're spreading Putin's talking points. See how that works? He deserved to be locked up and maybe even deserved to die for spreading Putin's talking points. Oh, and Rob, you and the people that disagree with Ukrainian aid are also spreading Putin's talking points. You didn't know I existed in 2016, but you hope I kept the same consistency. Talking about what? So Key Lime says, lock her up. Right? That's what he's saying. He's saying that if I voted for Trump or supported him saying lock her up, then that's somehow the same thing as me saying that it makes me a hypocrite for criticizing the locking up of Gonzalo Lira for political dissidents. The lock her up chant was not a chant that was about locking her up because she was the opponent of Donald Trump. It was because she allegedly had committed crimes, significant crimes, through her foundation, selling access, selling uranium to Russia, etc. Now, you could say what you want about Trump saying that, but when Trump was in office, did he lock her up? No, it was the opposite. It was Hillary's team that was working with the FBI, intentionally spreading disinformation in an attempt to lock up Donald Trump. It was Joe Biden's team that actually went forth and tried to lock up his opponent for most of the charges that are bullshit. That's true, Keyline. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true. He may have said lock her up before he officially announced he was running. And what's the difference? Equivocating the points does make sense. Pointing out there's a difference between anything. You could point out there's a difference between Dershowitz, who's the U.S. journalist that's locked up in Russia, that at least Tucker had the nerve to ask Putin about getting back, and is someone we should be making an effort to get back, and Navalny. That doesn't mean both can't be condemned when you're condemning the same principle. The principle we are condemning here is physically locking up people for being political dissidents. Saying, well, one guy was a low-level shithead who was just a womanizer who had a YouTube channel, and the other guy was political opposition. Okay, you could say, if your argument is, I'm only concerned about locking up political opposition, that's all I'm concerned with, fine. That's fine if you want to make that argument. I think that's a ridiculous argument. I don't think that I would draw the line and say, oh, you're just locking up journalists or private citizens for the crime of disagreeing with the government. That's okay. No problem there. But if you lock up someone who's a political opponent, then all of a sudden we have problems. I think that's stupid. I think the principle that's being discussed is Russia is disgusting because it locks up people that are in opposition to Putin. Not just people that are running against him, but people in general. He will attack journalists. He will attack private citizens. He will lock them up. He's attempted to poison them. That, to me, seems to be what the criticism is. The focal point of the criticism isn't, it only counts if it's his political rival. It seems to me that the focal point is locking up someone for the crime of disagreeing with the government is something that needs to be universally condemned by Western leaders. Okay, then why wouldn't we say the same of Gonzalo Lira? Again, the indictment says his charges were, quote, denying Russian war crimes and insulting troops. That justification is the same justification that could be used to lock up thousands of people that protested the Vietnam War or the Iraq War, or to lock up people like Ron Paul. Julian Assange, yeah, right. With Assange is another ball of wax. Then on to the next excuse. Gonzalo Lira tried to skip out on his charges. Here, let's listen to Respect say. It's different on its face because he was initially arrested in May 2023. Then he was released. Here we go. Isn't it amazing? Right before he typed this, I knew what the next excuse would be. You ready? Let's listen to what he says. Because he was initially arrested in May 2023, he was released on bail. He's only jailed long term after posting a video hinting that he was going to leave the country. How is this anywhere near the same as Navalny? Well, here's why it's the same. Why it would be the same thing as Navalny, because he was locked up and politically persecuted for being a political dissident. So him and Navalny being locked up is similar. They were both locked up for being a political dissident. Now the problem supposedly with Lira was he was saying this in Ukraine. That was the problem. For example, I might say things. What if I say, I think Ukraine's full of shit, I think Russia was right to invade, blah, blah, blah. Then for whatever reason, for my job, I travel to Ukraine. Do they have the right to lock me up? I didn't say it in Ukraine. I said it in the United States. Do they still lock me up? If Tucker travels to Ukraine tomorrow, does he get locked up? Just curious. If Lira was trying to flee the country, problem solved, right? Problem solved. Or let's put it a different way. Let's say there was a jailbreak in the jail that Navalny was in. We could all agree, Respect will agree, he's a political prisoner. He was locked up for being a political dissident. And then let's say that random inmates overpower the guards and there's a jailbreak and 100 people get out. And one of them's Navalny. And so they decide to take Navalny and execute him. Would you say, oh, well, then there's no problem there. He tried to escape. And there you go. It's exactly... Who said it was exactly the same thing? Who said it's exactly... No two crimes are ever the exact same thing. That doesn't mean that we don't... For example, we might say, we are against the... On principle, we stand against the concept of robbery. And I say, here's a robbery. And you say, well, here's a robbery too. And I'd say, well, those aren't exactly the same, so we're just going to condemn this robbery. And you're like, well, right, but this guy you're supporting is also a robber. He did this. Yeah, but it's different. There's differences. It's not exactly the same. There is no obvious difference. If they were so upset that he was in Ukraine saying this, why wouldn't they deport him to the United States or to Chile? Why wouldn't they? If he was trying to flee, why wouldn't they let him go? Shit, it saves us the trouble. Then you could say, if he came back, now maybe we're talking about something. But the idea that he tried to flee political persecution, oh, well, then he had it coming. When Respect says that, and when the people that say that, it's like, well, the difference is that Gonzalo Lira tried to leave. What he's really saying is he agrees with the original charges. Because you wouldn't blame someone for trying to escape what you consider to be political persecution. You wouldn't blame them. You would say, well, maybe it wasn't the smartest idea to try to escape, but I understand it, and it's still monstrous to lock him up for being a political dissident and then relock him up. There we go. And that's what Respect... And see, this is what I talk about. People like Respect. So thank you, Respect. I really do appreciate you being here. I'm going to stop reading your replies now, but I do appreciate you being here because it gives an example that I think is important for the audience to see. Now, he could have said that in the first place. That's what he could have said. He could have said, well, Lira had it coming. He justified... They were at war, and he justified this. Now, take this to its logical extension. So the argument seems to be something like this. Ukraine got invaded, and Gonzalo Lira, an American citizen's there, and he's like, good, I'm glad. I don't even know what Lira said, but let's say he went that far. I'm glad Russia invaded. They're right to do so because XYZ. He didn't give them weapons. He didn't send them money. He didn't provide them any spying or anything like that. At least none of that's in the indictment. All he did was say, I'm denying Russian war crimes. I don't think Russia did this shit that was bad, blah, 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 blah. They're justified in doing what they're doing. And he insulted Ukrainian troops, okay? And Respect says he deserved it because it was in wartime. Now let's take this to its logical extension. The United States is in war with Vietnam. Vietnamese protesters are insulting American troops. Happened all the time. And they're denying the war crimes of Vietnam. Why shouldn't they be locked up? And he'll say, because they weren't invaded. Okay, then let's go to the Pearl Harbor attack. So we're at Pearl Harbor, right? Japan bombs, right? We had an entire generation of Japanese Americans that were locked up in the Korematsu decision. Merely because of their ethnicity. Now, he might say, well, that's wrong just because of their ethnicity. But let's say some of them said, well, the U.S. was aggressing. The U.S. was aggressing in the South China Sea, and it was providing arms to allies in World War II. It was. So, should those people be locked up? Or after 9/11, there's an attack. We were at war. We were attacked on 9/11. And someone like Ward Churchill, who was this Native American professor that went around saying, U.S. imperialism's what led to this attack and U.S. is the great... Should Ward Churchill have been locked up? I didn't like Ward Churchill. I defended his right to say what he was saying, though. Let's take it a step further. Let's say we're not at war with a country, but we're at war with a virus. Oh, and Rob's saying some dangerous things about vaccine mandates that could result in people dying. We're in a crisis. We're in an emergency. Lock him up. You starting to see? You starting to see where it's going with these people? Do you see? The only limiting principle on what they would be willing to do to you is what they feel they could get away with. That's it. That's why you saw so many Democrats that were polled during the pandemic. Nearly 1 in 3 said we should take children away from people that aren't vaccinated. 50% said we should lock up and put in camps people that aren't vaccinated. They mean it. If the political direction continues to go in the direction it's going, they would cheer for someone like me being locked up. The only reason that they wouldn't is because they're afraid they couldn't get away with it, or I'm just a fly on the wall small-time streamer, so it's not even worth it. But if I got big enough, hence the verdicts against people like Donald Trump, hence the attacks on people like Elon Musk, and all the lawsuits he's facing now. They don't give a shit. I'm sitting here looking at it like, no, even people I disagree with, we need to have universal rights and we have to have principles that we try to apply equally. They're looking at it saying there are good people and there are bad people, and fuck the bad people. Which brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk. So that's it. That's it with Lira. And there's even a post on Destiny's Reddit someone showed me, where people on Destiny's Reddit's like, oh, I like when Rob comes on the show, but look at him defending Coach Red Pill. What the fuck? They don't see the principle. The principle is we shouldn't cheer for locking up political dissidents. And I went over and over the past 2 days with people on this. This one woman I was arguing with, she's like, well, what about Russia? And I'm like, right, yeah, that's bad. I'm condemning Russia wholeheartedly. I agree. There are people that, anyone who's followed me knows I've said this consistently. I'm still cheering for Ukraine to win. I can understand, just like I could